Hello, everyone, and welcome in. Happy Tuesday to you as we get ready to talk a little bit about what's happening up in Atlanta. My name is Bryce Coon, the host of All Things Georgia Tech here on The Crowded Booth. You can check us out several different places. TheCrowdedBooth.com, very easy, www.crowdedbooth.com. Or you can check us out at The Crowded Booth on all your social media platforms. And I'll also relay this to you. Check us out on YouTube. Hang out with us in the Discord there as well. But an emergency podcast. Let's hop on and talk about the big news. Let's just dive into this, okay? Let's talk about the fact that Georgia Tech is making a push of continuance, of continuity. Pretty much means the same thing, but we're going to talk a little bit about it here today and this afternoon. Make sure you lock it in. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, set up those notifications, and I'm going to talk to you why I think about that this is a home run, slam dunk, whatever you want to say higher for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. It's obvious to a lot of people that J Bat did good things. And look, some of the social media reaction to when J Bat left, the stepping stone idea, I'm going to get to that as I round out the show. But let's just talk about like who Ryan Alpert is. This is a guy who has been around the block in terms of he has spent multiple years in terms of different college environments. He comes from the University of Tennessee. He was the senior deputy athletics director and chief revenue officer. I'm going to talk about why that was something that was really, really important. And Dr. Bob says right here, similar profile to J-Bat. That is indeed true. But like we talked about, he was at University of Tennessee. He has nearly two decades of leadership in the SEC and beyond. Played a massive role in the national prominence for Tennessee across multiple sports. We'll talk about the fact that Tennessee has risen. If you're going to be real, like take out the fan biases of being joking and teasing at their fan bases. Tennessee has made their mark over the past 5 years as one of the more well-rounded athletic programs across the country. Alpert played a big role in that, and I want to talk to you why. This is a guy who's from Columbia, South Carolina. He went to University of South Carolina. This, to me, is a home run hire for several reasons. I'm going to lay it out to you here of why I think that is indeed so. All right, let's start with reason number one. Let's make sure nobody calls us on the hotlines either right now. Reason number one is his success in the SEC and the experience of the SEC. And I'm going to take a step back here and let's just call a spade a spade. Lots of conversation, the SEC is overrated and people want to get into that type of conversation and whatever it might be, whatever it might, you want to take that direction of conversation. That's fine with me. That's not the point of this. The point being the SEC is constantly on the bottom line. It's constantly in the mouths of talking heads. It's constantly being reciprocated in conversation around the college, not just football landscape, but the college athletics landscape. What does that tell you? In terms of notoriety, brand value, which is something I harp on so much on this podcast, Tennessee is at the forefront of that. Tennessee has understood what needs to happen in that, kind of fray of college athletics. And so you're bringing and you're plucking a guy from a conference of he got to watch up close and personal how things are run. And that's something that we praised at the time, the hire of J-Bat. I tweeted this, and I've got to find this, and just got raked over the coals of, oh man, where is this tweet? I said this back when J-Bat was hired, okay? Raked over the coals for this comment. This was on October 14th, 2022. The hiring of J-Bat from Alabama would give Georgia Tech a legitimacy I don't think they've ever had. It shows a seriousness from President Angel Cabrera and the others to bring Georgia Tech into the new age of college football. I got raked over the coals for that comment 3 years ago. What I'm going to be here to tell you today is that, was I wrong? Is Georgia Tech not ascending into a category to where they have not been before? I'm not talking about 1950. I'm not talking about 1990. I'm talking about in the scope of where we're talking right now in college football and college athletics. Georgia Tech is not a major player, but they're not on the way outside 4 turns behind everybody. They're creeping up there in terms of being able to compete in what needs to happen in terms of the layout of what you have to do to be one of the top competitors in college athletics. You just hired a guy in Ryan Alpert that knows exactly what it takes to not just compete with the Alabamas, the Ohio States, and the Georgias of the world, but he got firsthand experience of the rise of the Tennessee athletic department. And so there is something to say about plucking another person, like you did with Jay Batt, and understanding what it takes to compete at the highest level, regardless if you want to push back against the SEC is the best narrative. You know how I feel about that. You understand that. That's a sidebar conversation for a later time. What this does tell you, though, is that for a conference that must be doing something right, because regardless if they had a down year this past year, they did in football, regardless if the SEC, didn't have the results they wanted in March Madness, they're constantly in the news cycle. They're being one of the constant drivers of everything and every single decision that's happening across our sport and college athletics in general. So you just went and got a guy that has been in those meetings, has understood that from an SEC perspective. That is a massive, massive get, in my opinion, of being able to do that. So, if I went back and looked at that tweet that I had 3 years ago and got raked over the coals by a lot of Georgia Tech fans, well, it's one of those things like one of the comments ever had, how old are you? Best AD award named after Tech AD. Nobody cares. Like, I'm just going to be honest with you. The history should always be revered, especially with a place like Georgia Tech, but it can't be counted on to make decisions now. That's a ridiculous assumption. So it's not a shot at the history. You love the history. You revere the history. You respect the history. It cannot be counted on to make decisions 30, 40, 50, 60 years later. That's malpractice. And luckily, Angel Cabrera is not listening to the Twitter fans that want to sit here and just pump Bobby Dodd up over and over again and John Heisman up. It's great parts of history. But when you go on a recruiting trail, when you go to certain aspects, these kids don't know what that means. And you can be a fan of it. You can love it. I'm not trying to disrespect it, but it doesn't hold a lot of water in terms of what we're talking about today's day and age. So the hire of Alpert to be able to pluck another player from a big name program in a conference that drives the whole sport and drives a lot of college athletics, that's a win. He's been in the inside of these meeting rooms and knows what's coming next, knows the mindset of what it takes to be not just one step ahead, but 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of the rest of the competition. That's what Tennessee and SEC has been able to do over the past 5, 6, 7 years. The second part of why I like this, and it goes to Tennessee specifically, across college athletics, you have these awards, and I know they get mixed in with like a lot of Olympic sports, and it is what it is. But in terms of being on the cutting edge of NIL and the cutting edge of fundraising, there's an argument to be had that Tennessee has been at the forefront of that. Now, obviously, the Nico situation maybe puts a black eye. I don't think as much as now that we know more of it really on Tennessee. But in terms of understanding where this sport is heading, Tennessee was at the forefront with that lawsuit last year in terms of getting NIL deals within the state. They were in terms of promoting their players. They have been at the forefront. In terms of actual NIL property and deals, they have been at the forefront, especially in the sport of baseball. They've been there in basketball. They're there in football. So your big 3 moneymakers, and really they're 2, but Georgia Tech wants to be a baseball school too. And I don't think there's a better hire that they could have made out there in terms of the public list of candidates that understands what it takes to be really, really good. Maybe not elite, but really, really good, and being at the cutting edge of that and putting yourself in a position to be a championship caliber program than the guy like Ryan Alpert. Was the chief revenue officer for Tennessee, led a lot of the campaigns. I know Dr. Bob said this a second ago. This is a guy who is cut from the same type of cloth as Jay Batt in terms of the resume and experience. So when you're talking about, getting to the promised land in the sports you want to, right? You made the hire of Damon Stoudemire. He needed a lot of NIL promises to be able to make that job work. The jury's still out there. Brent Key, so far, he's stabilized the program. Massive 2025 season upcoming that you need him to be better. The NIL has continued to be built up from essentially nothing from 2 years ago. The third part of it is you got a brand new baseball coach in James Ramsey and a program that is just constantly knocked on the door but can't knock it down. Does hiring Alpert guarantee you championships or NCAA tournament bids? It doesn't. At the end of the day, the sport is still the sport. But all the things surrounding it, I think Ryan Alpert gives you one of the best chances of any candidate in the country to be able to get to that doorstep. Your execution, your players, the management, the coaching, development, that's going to determine if you knock down the door as a program that can make the rise into a top 30 athletic department in the country. But you just hired a guy, like I mentioned earlier, who has been in those meeting rooms, understands what it takes, and his program, in terms of Tennessee athletics, has been at the forefront of a lot of the decisions made across the college athletics landscape. That reason alone, those two reasons, I think this is an absolute slam dunk hire, and it provides the third and final reason, continuity within what you want to do. There's going to be differences in how J-Bat operated and how obviously Alpert's going to operate. That's a given. You know those things are going to happen. But I think one of the biggest things in understanding what this is it provides continuity in the way you want to build your athletics program and knowing what you need. Georgia Tech is a fan base that has a lot of wealthy donors. Not every single one of them and not a majority of them are bought into making the athletic program better. You really have to understand this fan base, and I think Bat did a really good job of that, but you need proof. And man, Alpert enters a 2025-2026 academic calendar year where you arguably have the best football team that you've had in 10 years. You arguably really have a head coach in basketball that needs to make the NCAA tournament. You have an up-and-comer baseball coach in James Ramsey, who has been lauded as the coach in waiting for several years now, and you have a recruiting and talent base that's among top 20 at least every single year in the country once you take in development and everything like that. So you're entering a year where 2025 and 2026, that academic calendar year, could be the launching pad for something special. Not just for Ryan Alpert, not just for those three coaches I mentioned, but for Georgia Tech athletics as a whole. So I love the cutting edge of what Alpert has done at several different stops. Just one of the things that I like this, and this is maybe an underrated part of it. Alpert served as the lead for the Neyland Entertainment District, a transformative public-private partnership that is revitalizing Knoxville's riverfront and enhancing the game day experience around Neyland Stadium. One of the big things that I think fans wanted was to be able to see some more game day environment stuff. And Bat led the forefront in a lot of these campaigns, ways to energize and integrate the fan base into what was happening on game days. Whether it was obviously the block parties with football, whether it was stuff with basketball or promotional materials there for baseball and other sports as well. They like, Tennessee is one of the more well-rounded athletic departments in the country in terms of on-field performance. I mean, you can laugh at not winning a championship. If that's your barometer for success, then you're living in Candyland. Hashtag not an ad. But just to me in general, there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of carryover and continuity. Will conversations be different? Will things be handled differently? Sure. There's different nuances. No person's the same. But I think just in terms of what you bring to the table, in terms of a guy that understands what needs to happen and has a financial background in those aspects, there's a lot of continuity, a lot of things to love, to where J-Bat maybe dropped some things off. Not like he dropped the ball, but maybe he dropped some task off that Palumbo, who's now gone, was trying to carry out, that now you can carry out with this new regime change. So wanted to get on here, talk briefly about it. I think this is a slam dunk hire. I think this is going to be very, very good for Georgia Tech. It's a program that needs to be creative and innovative when it comes to ways of raising money, raising funds, and getting people on board. You did a really good job of that under J-Bat. The torch has now been passed to Ryan Alpert. Time will tell if it's a good decision, but man, hindsight's always 20/20. But I'll tell you this right now, there's a lot to like about his resume. You can check out his full briefing over at thecrowdedbooth.com. We did a quick piece on it. Shout out to the Tennessee Athletics page on that, some of that information, background stuff. It's going to be really good. So it's a lot of good stuff that I like about what Alpert brings to the table. I think Georgia Tech is in a good spot athletically in terms of fundraising. And this year is kind of a prove it year in terms of, why should we do more than what we already do? Football is going to lead off there here in about a month. So going to be a lot of fun. We appreciate you tuning in as always. Quick little episode. We'll have more content coming tonight. Will's going to be back on the sticks. Auburn versus Ball State in the College Bowl 26 stream. I'll be back later. Georgia Tech, Clemson, week 3 matchup there as well. So make sure you tune in tonight. And it is, we'll see what happens. hoping this pick is better than Bryce's past defense in college football 26. Justin, I hope so as well, my friend, Mr. Klingle. We'll catch you next time. Make sure you check out section 103 before we get out of here. It's the best Georgia Tech market or stuff on the market. In terms of apparel, look, we know the bookstore can be abysmal at times. We know that Adidas doesn't maybe treat you right. But my friends over and Steven over at section 103, they do a fantastic job. You can use code TCB10 to get 10% off your first purchase today. Man, it's great stuff. I love the Haynes King jerseys, the Brent Key cutoff hoodie. A lot of great stuff to get you ready for game day and everything, getting ready for the Flats. And for a lot of you, making that trip out to Colorado for the season opener against Prime Time and the Colorado Buffaloes. So we'll be back to talk more and more about this as the summer winds along. ACC Media Day is getting ready to kick off. Lots of news and notes and previews and predictions here in the Crowded Booth. My name is Bryce Kuhn. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and set up notifications so you know when we go live again. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a fantastic rest of your afternoon.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Kuhn.